Well, hello. This is Mary Rose Wildfire McGuire, and I have a very special episode today of The Written Advantage. My guest is Matthew Jarvis, and he is just a phenomenal guy. I mean, you're going to find out more about him, but let me read you a little bit about him. He is a critically acclaimed author, and he quite literally wrote the book for financial advisors on how to deliver massive value with his groundbreaking book, Delivering Massive Value, the Financial Advisor's Guide to a Highly Profitable, Hyper Efficient Practice. I just got to love that title. Okay, titles are a big deal when you write books. That's a great title. His intense focus on delivering the most value possible to clients and spending quality time outside of the office with his family, all while being highly profitable in these pursuits, has catapulted Matthew Jarvis into the global league of extraordinary advisors. Today, Matthew Jarvis is one of the most sought after public speakers in the financial industry for his, albeit controversial, no nonsense tactics to systemize practices to maximize efficiency. As co founder of the Perfect RIA, Matthew co hosts the most prominent podcast for financial advisors by financial advisors. With over 1 million downloads, the Perfect RII podcast and coaching platform have revolutionized the antiquated methodology historically used in the industry by exposing vulnerabilities, promoting open collaboration, and holding experts and peers accountable. This is a quote by Michael Kitces, which is a really cool quote. What's unique about Matthew, though, is his my goodness gracious, is his ongoing focus on increasing the overall efficiency and profitability of his firm, first by systemizing his business processes in order to deliver even more value to his clients, and then raising his fees so that he's fairly compensated for the greater, more systematized, my gosh, I can't say that word, systematized value that he now delivers. And that is a wonderful quote by Michael Kitces. As the lead financial advisor of Jarvis Financial, an RIA in Seattle, Washington, Matthew's team manages $175 million for 150 households, generating approximately $2 million of revenue, all while taking some 250 free days each year. Welcome, Matthew. And I'm sure you're going to be the envy of a lot of financial advisors when they read that or hear that free days of each year.
Yeah, well, Mary Rose, I have to confess, I'm probably going to make this my morning alarm clock now. If I could wake to you reading this such kind things about me, that would be great. But thank you so much for having me on your show.
Well, thank you. This is, like I said, this is a real treat. So, I admit, I think I just saw this book, your Massive Value book. Were there other
Yeah.
books that you wrote before that?
No, that's the only book I've ever written. I've written some newsletters and blog posts and whatnot, but I had never written a book before.
Okay. All right. Well, tell me about your book.
Yeah, so I wrote the book Delivering Massive Value really as sort of a guide back to myself. It was sort of the book that I wish somebody would have given me 20 years ago when I started my career, that I could have avoided a lot of mistakes that I made along the way. And I've been honored that thousands, tens of thousands of advisors now have purchased the book and have told me that's helped them improve their practice. So it's a real honor.
That's awesome. So your audience then for the book are, well, I guess, I mean, I could see people who are just starting out, but maybe people who have been a financial advisor or planner, maybe for, I don't know, maybe 10 years or something like that. I mean, have you reached them also with your book?
Yeah, the reach has been much broader than I thought. So it is targeted to financial advisors. But in fact, I'm at a conference right now as we're recording this, and I had an advisor who just graduated college, said the book gave him the guide for finding his first practice. I've talked to an advisor this morning over breakfast who's 61 and said, hey, I got your book. I've been in the business for 30 years, and you taught me things I didn't know were possible. So it seems to have
Wow.
spoken to the entire range. Yeah,
That is that's an awesome response to get because
it's very exciting.
yeah, there's some uh, um so these are people basically that are operating their own practice, the ones for which you've written this book, correct?
It's predominantly people that are running their own practice, though the principles, right, like all business management, as we talk about writing books, right, the principles remain the same. So how are you delivering value to your clients in a systematized way? How are you charging fees? How are you getting referrals? How are you graduating clients that aren't a good fit? Those things seem to apply regardless of the size of the firm. But yeah, I predominantly spoke to smaller advisors because that's what I know the best.
Right. I liked that term, graduating clients that aren't a
Mm.
good fit. I love watching any kind of espionage type of
Oh, sure.
films. And you know how they'll say, okay, so and so needs to be retired. We know what that means, you know?
We know what
It's
that
like
means. Yeah.
they need to be permanently removed anyway.
Yep.
So, but anyway, regarding, let's go back to the whole thing with your book. What was going
Yeah.
on in your life that inspired you to write the book? Like, why did you decide to do it now at the time you were writing it?
Yeah, so if we rewind just a couple of years to 2017, though I'll confess that's probably more years than a couple, I was on a podcast by Michael Kitces. You read a quote from him, and he invited me to be on the Advisor Success podcast, and I was deeply honored. And I just sort of shared my story, and then advisors started reaching out to me, first a few, and then hundreds and thousands, and said, "Hey, what you've done, Mary Rose, to your point, what you've done, this lifestyle practice, this is what I want. How did you do it?" And at first, I would say, "Well, sit down with me, let me tell you." But then I needed a way for it to scale to reach more people effectively, and that inspired the book.
I love it. Yeah, I think, and it's not, I know that this isn't just financial advisors. It's many people in the professional services field,
Hmm.
they experience kind of the same thing, like they're
Hmm.
just putting so much time into trying to make things run, and then to try to, to get clients, and then, to service those clients, and it just seems to be never ending. So yeah, to have some free time, that's why I'm saying that's probably, I'm kind of thinking that might be like one of the strongest triggers for your book, is basically designing your life and living your life so that you have time for other things, and of course your
Hmm.
family and relationships, you know?
Yes. Yeah, most definitely. What's interesting, and I was the same way early in my career before I figured this out, is we all think, well, I don't have time for that. Like maybe Jarvis lives in some world where he's not busy. But then we kind of peel back the onion and we say, wait a second, a lot of time that we're all spending at the office in the chair is not really working time. And so more than anything, what I got really good at is saying, hey, if I'm not actually being productive, I don't need to be here. But if I'm going to be here, I want to be productive for all of those hours. And so it was a matter of, instead of kind of flirting around for 40 hours, dilly dallying, I'd say, great, let me just do this in 3 days and take the other two off.
Right, right, right. Are you familiar with the Pomodoro technique by chance with
It sounds
productivity?
really familiar. Remind me, though, please, Mary Rose.
It's when you focus solely on one task for 25 minutes. So it's
Okay.
just 25 minutes, and then you take a 5-minute break, and then you
Hmm.
return, you do another 25 minutes and take another 5-minute break. And so basically you do 4 sessions of those. And it helps people to kind of stay on track with a
Hmm.
task that needs to get done instead of getting distracted, which, of
Hmm.
course, we all know that social media is famous for
Yes, it
distracting
is.
us, So
Yes.
I
I'm a
wasn't
big
sure.
fan.
Yeah.
I'm a big fan of that approach. In fact, I often keep an egg timer, like a kitchen wind up timer on my desk, and I'll set it for 25
Yes.
minutes or 30 minutes, and I'll say, great, I have this much time. I use it as a variation of Parkinson's law, right? Which is an activity will take as much time as is allocated to it. So
Yes.
if for me, if I have all day to create a financial plan, as an example, it will take me all day to create a financial plan. Though, Mary Rose, to your point, most of that time I'll spend on social media. So instead, if I set a timer for an hour and I say, hey, I have to get this done in an hour, I can come back to it again tomorrow, but it has to have a real finite shelf life.
Yes. I am the same way. I use time blocking to get my
Yes.
stuff done. So
Yep.
it's, in my calendar, and I will write from here to here, this is what I'm going to work on. And then after that, it's like, okay, I got to move on. But I will admit that, and I don't know if this would be considered cheating, but if I touch that project just for a little bit, I cross it off. So I get, I get that little, ping inside of me going, okay, I did it. Even though I
Well,
might not have like completely finished whatever.
for sure. Well, here, Mary Rose, quiz for you. Where is the first recorded instance of time blocking? So the idea of time blocking, right? This is an old school technique, right? People have talked about it forever.
Right,
What's the
right.
first recorded incident of time blocking?
Oh my goodness.
Oh,
I
you're going to
don't
laugh when
know.
you, this is one of my favorite jokes.
Okay.
Mary Rose, Genesis chapter 1, the Lord made the world in 7 days. Could have taken 7 years, 700 years. He says, listen, we're just going to get this thing done, light, dark today.
I
Tomorrow,
love
isn't that great? So
that is
anyone who
great.
claims credit for time blocking or time management, somebody's got you beat and he did a better job than the rest of us.
That's
So
right. That's right. I love that. I'm going to use that.
you should
I'm
use that one. I
stealing,
thought you'd
yes.
like that one. Yeah.
Yes, I love it. I love it. But yeah, it does make a difference because some people, when they have a planner, sometimes they'll use
Hmm.
horizontal, for their days, a horizontal setup.
Yeah.
But I like vertical and looking at all those hours going, okay, this is what I can do. So anyway, so let's talk about your process for
Yeah.
writing your book. Can you share your experience? For instance, did you have a routine for writing content now that we're talking about time blocking? How did you make the time to write your book?
Yeah, it started to step back with my podcast, the Perfect RA podcast. It gave me, so we would record episodes every week on these topics. And so it gave me an outlet to say every single week, and it was every Monday at 8 a.m. Pacific, every single week for an hour, I'm going to record an episode on these topics. And so it forced me to really think through, all right, how do I articulate this and how does this thing work? And it let me get a lot of practice on it. And then, so when I transitioned from the podcast to the book, I already had a lot of practice. But then it was blocking out chunks of time. Usually I'd block out 4 to 6 hours a week because that's just the time I needed. Not all of that was productive time, but it was, I'm going to sit down for 4 hours and I'm not going to have my distractions. And I'm going to just scratch on a piece of paper, and I would send it to my editor and I would scribble on a piece of paper. And he would say, listen, if you send me these scribbles, I have to pay someone to transcribe this and I'm going to charge you for that. And I said, well, that's fine, because if I sit down at my computer and type, I'm going to go on the internet and I'm going to check emails, and I'm not actually. So I filled yellow pads, Mary Rose, of content for the book.
Okay, so you were writing down basically your ideas, like it wasn't like full sentences. Is that what was going on?
A lot of it was stream of consciousness originally. I thought, what
Okay.
seems to resonate most? When I talk to people at conferences or people reach out on the podcast, what seems to resonate to them the most? What am I most passionate about? And that's why I had so much fun with the book and why I think it's done well. I thought, all right, what am I most passionate about? And I would write out ideas and I would write down stories that I had recalled about it. And luckily, I worked with a great editor like yourself, Mary Rose, who could take those stories and say, all right, here's the thread through them, and here's how we're going to organize it, and here's all of those things that I'm not good at all.
Right, right. And that is what you just said about passion is something really important when you're writing a book, whether it's a financial advisor or anyone writing a nonfiction business book. You you kind of have to find that place where you're writing from your heart, you know, and you're writing things that you really believe in, because
Mhm.
that when you're able to tap into that kind of emotion, that is when you're going to create some compelling copy. You're going to create compelling content because you're sharing your enthusiasm, and that comes
Mhm.
across on the pages, because people who just want to write, sort of like the formulas or whatever, it's like, no, I want to know what really floats your boat. Why is this important to you? what
Mhm.
what compelled you? What drove you to go in this direction or that direction, or make this decision or that decision? So it sounds like you were able to capture that, even though it wasn't like word for word that you were writing that. You were capturing the passion, which, that's the most important part, I think.
Yeah, Mary Rose, I 100% agree. I started with the most passionate things, the scripts, the situations, how to graduate clients, all these different things. And then I would sort of work backwards into that. Okay, so here's how I talk to a client when I'm going to graduate them. And then let's take a step back and say, well, why would we want to graduate a client? And then I take a step back and say, well, what's my head trash around that? Why have I not graduated them? I know this client's not a good fit, but I'm worried that if I graduate them, I won't have money to pay my family and that all my clients will leave me. We call that head trash. And so
Right.
I just thought, if I was sitting across from this person, right, Mary Rose, if you were a financial advisor and you were at some point in your career and you and I were sitting down, what would I want to tell you? That, and that was what I kept in my mind. Just if I had to tell Mary Rose just one thing about graduating clients, what would that be? Oh, and it's got to be this thing, and I would work from there.
Okay. I'm just curious because I have worked with a lot of different financial advisors, and we haven't really gotten into the weeds regarding this particular issue. But is that one of the biggest like challenges for financial advisors? Is that right fit, or what are some of the large challenges, I guess?
Yeah, there's several. Time management's a big one, but when it comes to clients, advisors are very rarely will they do a client profitability analysis, right? They say, "Well, I love all my clients and they're all great people," and I get that. You should love your clients and you should respect them, but this is at the end of the day a business. And so
Right.
what we do is have them make a list of all of their clients with their names removed, how much they have in assets, how much revenue they're generating. Names have to be removed because Mary Rose, if I see your name on my client list, I think Mary Rose is the nicest person I've ever met. She never takes any of my time. Yes, she only pays me $12 a year in fees, but I've got to keep Mary Rose. And so we take the names off and then we
Right.
look and we say, all right, these are my most profitable clients. These are clients that would be better served by someone else. And then I talk about this in the book. We get 5 exceptions per 100. So if I'm looking at my list of 100 clients and I say, I can't graduate Mary Rose. I love her too much. She's too great. Then I'm great. That's one of my 5 exceptions. Now I only have 4 left. But everybody else has to either be profitable or they need to find an advisor who's better suited for them.
Right. That is an excellent explanation. And if you're listening to this, financial advisor, financial planner, RIA, you need to get this book because this is sounding phenomenal. I mean, that it is an emotional business. I mean, we know that
Mm-hmm.
money is emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And so those who are trying to monitor it, organize it, maintain it, whatever, in a responsible way, emotion is part of that. And
Mm-hmm.
so, I can understand, but just like you said, you're running a business and you want to look to see what is most profitable. I learned that early on, by the way, when I entered into the copywriting profession, that,
Yes. Yeah.
it basically, someone, and I can't even remember now who, but they said, take a look at the projects. What are the most lucrative types of projects that you can get? Now look at what you're doing now. What is it that you're doing the most of, and just trying to weigh all of that together so that you still can basically make money and stay in business, but
Yeah.
still do the projects that you do enjoy, because some people enjoy the projects that may not be bringing in as much, but still, they like doing it.
Oh, totally. And if we're making an intentional decision, right? If you say, "Hey, Mary Rose, to your point, I've looked at all these different revenue options, and this is the group or niche or specialty that I love the most. I'm just so passionate about it. And I understand that maybe it's not the most profitable, but it's an intentional decision." What most people do in your industry and mine is, I'll just sort of do whatever comes, and I never step back to say, "Why am I doing it this way? Why are my fees
Right.
set up this way? Why there's this guy that I hate. Every time he calls, I see his name, I cringe. Why am I talking to this person?" Type of thing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, he's my dad's best friend. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, yeah, and I thought I was doing him a favor, and no good deed goes unpunished. Yeah.
That's right. Okay, well, moving on. What would you consider your biggest obstacle to writing your book?
Boy, my biggest obstacle, and thankfully, like I said, I had a great editor like yourself, was that I would get burned out on it, right?
Ah,
Because
yes.
I think we all have short attention spans, even more so today. But a lot of entrepreneurs, just by their nature, have short attention spans. I think that Mary Rose, they call that ADD now or something. I'm not really sure. And so I would get a couple chapters into my book, and then I just wouldn't want to write another word. And my editor would follow up and held me accountable. And he said, "Hey, listen, we had a good relationship." And so he would say, "Hey, listen, just so you know, like if you don't get me these other chapters by next Thursday, we're going to have to extend your contract by 3 months, which is no big deal. I'm just going to charge you for another 3 months on top of whatever we had agreed to, because that was our agreement." And that was the messaging that worked with me. If he had said, "Now, Matthew, you really ought to do this," that wouldn't have resonated with me. But he just said, "Hey, listen, no worries. Get it to me by Thursday or we'll extend the contract 3 months. I'll just send you the bill. It's not a problem. You let me know." Well, I don't want to pay more for this. And so I would get my work done. But that was my biggest thing. Like if it were not for that, the book would still just be notes in a pile. It'd be a dream
Right.
somewhere.
I love it. So in other words, you were getting the stick, not the carrot.
Yeah, yep. Because
It's like,
I feel like for a lot of us, the carrot fades, right? Like my vision
right.
of I'm going to have this book and it's going to be so impactful. When it got down to just grinding out the work, the motivation didn't carry through the hard stuff. It got me excited. It got me started. Didn't
Right.
carry me through.
Right. And I have experienced that both with myself and with the authors that I work with. It's everybody has that, oh yeah, I want to write a book. And even, they get excited, they create an outline, and oh yeah, okay. But then that day by day, you know, and I did, by the way, interview another woman who she was working with Wiley.
Oh,
And
wow. Yeah.
yeah, so Wiley was publishing her book, but she was saying that she was forced, of course, to stay on a schedule because they had a deadline. And that's what
Mm,
happens when you do deal with traditional publishers. There's a
yeah.
whole lot of other people who are involved in that process. And so it does keep you on track. But she admitted, yeah, I had to write a lot of times when I didn't feel like it. So
There
I'm like,
is,
if,
yeah,
yeah,
there's
if I
certainly a
waited
balance, right? Yeah.
Oh, there is. And if I
Hmm.
waited for the muse to come and inspire me, I wouldn't really get much done. I mean,
Yep.
there are times that, yeah, I'm on fire for something and, if ideas are just like exploding in my head and I write and write and write. But then there's other times that I just don't feel like it, just like what she
Yeah.
said. But yet, I know I have to create content,
Yeah.
so whether or
A
not you like
great
to
book
do
for
it.
that is Stephen Pressfield's The War of Art. So not to be confused with The Art of War by Sun Tzu, but
Right.
The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield. Just a magnificent work on the creative process.
Yes, I need to read that one. I have another book of his I read called Do the Work.
You Do the
And
Work is a
he
great
yes,
sequel. Yep.
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 And when he personified the word resistance, so he
Yes.
capitalized it. That was such a huge light bulb moment for me because I realized that I'm like, you know what? This is a battle. In fact, I just recently you're if you're listening to this, you're not going to see what I'm going to do, but I'm showing an index card that says I have been born for battle. And I have it right here in front of my monitor. The reason is because I understand more clearly than ever that every time I sit down to create anything,
Hmm.
the resistance is going to come. And I think that's important that if you're writing a book to realize, just accept it because you are going to get resistance. But to just, you know, plug through and do it anyway. You probably had those moments, right? When
Oh,
you're
for
like, oh,
sure.
yeah,
For sure. Well,
I
and the
got to get,
resistance, it's a good sign. And Stephen Pressfield talks about this, right? I think if you're sitting down, and Mary Rose, correct me if your experience has been different. If you're sitting down to write a book or any creative process and you never face any resistance, it's probably because you're not making very good content and you're using it to avoid something else, right? Like resistance will never get in your way to be lazy. It will never be like, you know what, I probably shouldn't watch Netflix tonight. Resistance has never spoken that word, right?
right.
So, if you're not experiencing resistance, something's wrong. Something's gone awry there.
Right. That's a very good distinction. And my experience is the same. I think that in Do the Work, Stephen Pressfield does talk about that because he said
Hmm.
whenever you're undertaking something of importance,
Yep.
something that's going to make a difference, that's when you're going to get hit with it. So I liked that type of distinction, that kind of made yeah. But I guess I've never thought about it quite all the way you did, and I'm going to be thinking about that now. I'm gonna, I think, gauge a little bit more some of the tasks that I do. Wait a minute, I'm not getting too much resistance here, wanting to go in the kitchen and
That's
eat
right. Yeah.
something. It's like, sure, Mary Rose, go away. Stop doing what you're doing. Okay, so the next question I have for you is, what would you say to another financial planner or advisor who is considering writing a book to encourage them?
I would say start with whatever subject or lesson or teaching resonates most with the people you talk to. So what's something that goes on in your practice or in your life or in your specialty where when you explain it a certain way, it just absolutely resonates with people. A good friend of mine, Brian Hanks, he wrote a couple of books for dentists that are graduating college that want to buy a practice because he noticed that no one was helping those people out. He had just graduated college himself. He was really passionate about that. And when he explained certain things to these graduating dentists, it really resonated. And so he then wrote a book around that. So he wasn't guessing, hey, what should I write about? He's saying, hey, every time I talk about this, people's eyes perk up, like they're like, oh wow, that makes so much sense. That's a real indication of where to start. And if you start collecting those, quickly becomes an entire book.
Right, right. By the way, you said something when we were talking about how you write a book. One of the
Yeah.
things I did want to mention was that many people will speak their book into
Yes.
existence. So if you do have, like, for instance, a podcast, or you just want to do an audio file and you just talk, then you could do that and have it transcribed. So
Hmm.
I've actually offered that to some authors where I would interview them, we would record it, and I would get it transcribed. And that was a very rough first draft, but it was starting from somewhere. So
Yeah.
so that's another little tip. If you're thinking about writing a book out there, just, consider doing that. And it's not as
Strongly agree.
intimidating a lot of
Mhm.
times as staring at a blank, screen or blank white page
Yeah.
in your notebook. But okay, so I do have more, of course, more questions here. So, do you think there are too many financial planner and financial advisor authors?
No, I'm not even sure how we could measure that. Well, Mirrors, I guess it depends on what you're solving for. So if you're trying
Right.
to be the next Dave Ramsey or the next whomever and have a multi-million copy bestseller, yeah, I don't know how to do that. B, I would imagine that's a very competitive market. But if you're saying, hey, I work with a certain group of people and I don't feel like they're being spoken to, then great. Though even and Marius, you would know this better than I do. Even if you're writing the 1,000th book on this topic, and it gives you the confidence to approach people and say, "Hey, you need to fix this in your life," and I'm the person to help you. It worked. It worked. We just have to manage expectations here. I didn't write my book trying to make an Amazon bestseller. I wrote my book because I thought I want to share this message, and if it resonates with one person, then it was a success. And it's resonated with a lot more than one person, but that was my benchmark. And I didn't really care how many other people had written practice management books. I had a story that I wanted to tell.
Right. That is, again, another great place to start when thinking about writing a book. It's like, what
Hmm.
is your story? Why is it so important to you to tell it? Why now? Who do you think will benefit from it? I mean, I'm surprised actually that more financial advisors haven't written a book, because I'm like, it's a great way to get your name out there.
Hmm.
It also immediately establishes you as an expert. It is a great way to start conversations. When you say to someone, I've written a book. Oh, really? What is the book about? So, and when you're at conferences, that, for you, you're like in the perfect place for your book, because these are the people that you wrote it for,
Yep.
but it's just, there's like so many benefits to it, which is, again, why I'm doing what I'm doing, because I want to encourage as many people as I can, as many financial advisors and planners and RIAs and CFBs and who else, that writing a book is going to make a big difference for your business.
It is.
So,
The one
yeah,
kind of caveat I would give there is it needs to be a quality work, right? So this needs to represent,
yes,
and I know this is all you do, but a lot of advisors listen. I know early in my career I was tempted. Luckily, I couldn't borrow any more money to do this. There was someone in our industry who can remain unnamed, and for X fee, you could co-write a book with him, and your name would be, and they would just slap your name on this book that was really his book, and it was poorly written and it was low quality. And I knew a lot of advisors that had done that, and it did not bring credibility. People, we all know, and Mary Rose, you know this. We all know when something isn't right. Like we can sense it. We can tell it's not sincere. It's slimy. It's whatever it is. So I 100% agree with you. Absolutely write a book, but it is a significant investment of time and money, and you need to partner with someone who's going to create a really quality product. If you create junk, it will reflect junk on you.
right. That's a
Yeah.
very good point. That's a very good point. So, how, I was just mentioning in the whole thing about business, how has the book affected your business? Has it? Because I know that you're writing primarily to other advisors and planners, but has it affected your business overall at all?
It has dramatically impacted my coaching and consulting business. So my business lines that are for financial advisors, it's been a major driver. In fact, actually, I just saw the stats for this last 12 months, and fully half of our new clients for our advisor program can directly be traced back to the book. Fully half of them. The other half came from an assortment of things, emails and websites and all this other stuff, speaking gigs, but fully half we traced back to my book. And so again, it wasn't written for consumers, so it didn't drive revenue to my financial advisor practice. It was written to advisors, and it's been an incredible success tool.
Oh gosh, yes. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. again, the whole thing of establishing your credibility. And when you have a book, it's sort of a shortcut to learning your system, learning your philosophy, learning how you view things.
Yeah.
It enables somebody to read that book and then right off the bat go, yep, he's for me. Or, okay, I disagree with him a little bit on this, and okay, I'll just move on, So it can qualify prospects really well. I think that some people, when they think about books, they don't maybe look at it that way,
Mm.
but it could be a real time saver because you probably, like any other business owner, have had situations where you get on the phone with someone and then you can quickly tell, okay, they're not a fit or a client, whatever. But sometimes you invest a little bit more time in that whole process than maybe what you
Hmm.
would like to invest. so
Yeah.
so
Yep.
having a book, giving a book to someone, it kind of gives them a shortcut to learning who you are, what you believe in, what you don't believe in, what you stand for, don't stand for, and then they can go from there. I don't
Yeah,
know
that's
if
a
you've
good point
looked at
that you
it that
bring up.
way or
Oh, for sure. It's really kind of a multi-function tool, right? Because again, none of us are solving to have a New York Times bestseller, though maybe you are, and great luck to you if that's the case. So this isn't just a book that's going to occupy a space on a bookshelf at a Barnes and Noble, right? It's Mary Rose, to your point, it's a multifaceted tool. So when people reach out and they say, hey, Matthew, I've got a quick question for you. Cool. Have you checked out my book yet? Oh, I haven't. All right, great. Read my book first. And if your question is still unanswered, I would love to talk to you, which then, Mary Rose, to your point, it brought credibility. It saved me the time. It actually gave them way better information because me spending 5 minutes talking to someone, I'm going to give them a quick, let's keep moving answer. They can go ahead and read the entire book and get as much information as they need.
right. Yeah, I can tell, and it's in your communication style. You are a like take well, I won't say take no prisoners, but you are very focused and you want to get things done, move on to the next thing, so for somebody who might be on the fence, they can learn a lot more by reading your book
Mm-hmm.
than just, talking to you and kind of hedging, maybe going back and forth. Because I think you're the one that's like, see the hill, take the hill kind of
Yeah.
guy.
Yes.
So, all right. Well, moving on, what else would you like? Oh, well, before I ask that one,
Hmm.
let's see, I think I asked, okay, what surprised you the most about the process of writing a book?
Boy, what surprised me the most is that books don't proofread themselves. So
Yes, that is true.
they they don't, and uh, related to that, how we speak is not how the written word works, right? The written word has to be succinct, it has to be grammatically correct, it has to go in a flow. I noticed that I would tell the same story again and again, which is fine in a social setting, but in 3 chapters of the book, the same story came up, and so like, well, wait a second, I can't use that again and again. We need to edit that, but
Mm,
it's not just is the comma in the right place or are the sentences structured correctly. It's what does this flow and do the paragraphs flow and does this belong in this chapter versus that chapter? There are, as you know, Mary Rose, there are a lot of pieces to that puzzle.
right. Absolutely. I would say one of the more common challenges with writing a book is nailing the transitions. Because what
Yes.
happens is people will write and it's in their head, but they don't realize that they haven't explained it thoroughly
Yeah.
or made the transition from one point to the other. So a lot of times when I'm, reading someone's manuscript, I'm like, okay, how did you get from this point to this point? Like,
Hmm.
we need to have some kind of a transition, or maybe we need to flesh this out a little bit more so that the reader can understand what you're talking about. Again, it's because you're so close to it,
Yes, it
that
is.
a lot of times you might not see that.
Yeah, even for things smaller than an entire book, I always like to read it back out loud. And so if I've written it, and there's
Yes.
some science behind it, and I don't totally understand, but that the writing is on one side and the speaking is on another side. So I'll look at a paragraph. Oh yeah, that looks perfectly fine. Then I'll go to read it out loud, and I'll realize 2 sentences end mid thoughts, and that's not the right there and there, whatever it is. Yeah, to read it back out loud, which I also recorded the audio book for my book, and my biggest regret in that process is I wish I would have recorded the audio book before we released the print one, because I
Oh,
found all sorts of things that weren't as clear in my mind as I thought they were. So as I'm reading it, I'm like, wait, there's a whole piece, I missed an entire step here that Mary Rose, to your point, I thought it in my head. It didn't get out. So as I'm reading it in the studio, like, oh man, we forgot this, but the book had already gone to print. And so I
right.
would definitely, if I were to do it for my next book, I would definitely read the entire audio book before we release the print book so I could go back and fix those things.
Right. Oh my gosh, I am so glad that you talked about that, because that right there is a really golden tip of the day that could save somebody a lot of
A
a lot of
lot of
anguish,
time.
you know.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I know that there's been times I've read my copy out loud, and it's along the same lines where you
Mhm.
read it and you're like, "Oh, wait a minute, that didn't flow." Or that didn't sound right, or wait a minute, I need to use this word instead, whatever, you know. And yeah, using the same word or the same story, as you pointed out, it needs to you need to fix it, and
Mhm.
sometimes you don't notice it unless you read it out loud.
Yeah. Yeah. And especially if you don't have somebody else, you've got to have somebody else do it. You can't, it's how our brain has worked, whatever it is. And it's, by the way, it's not my area of expertise, right? That's not
Right.
how my brain
Right.
works. When I read books, I skim them pretty rapidly, and that's not the right format for a proofreader.
Right, exactly. You're absolutely right. Yeah, that's why I've worked on teams, and it's very helpful to have an editing team, because,
Mm,
you'll write it and it goes through a few more people, and a lot of times they'll pick up stuff that you didn't pick up. And if you did notice it, you would have fixed it, but you just didn't for whatever reason.
yeah,
So
totally.
yeah. Okay. Well, talking about a little bit more about surprising, what surprised you the most about publishing the book and being recognized as an author?
Oh, well, what surprised me the most of publishing a book is what a racket Amazon.com is. What an absolute racket. So, for those of you that have not written a book, like authors get basically, let's in round numbers, you know how much authors get from Amazon? Zero. It's zero. Like you might get a couple of pennies. Amazon takes all of the money.
Yes.
Like Audibles, if you're self-publishing, Audibles, Amazon's taking 70% of that. Now, again, if you're with a bigger publisher, they're probably negotiating a different price, but then the publisher's taking it. It is not a profit center. So if you're thinking, hey, I'm going to write this book and I'm going to hire Mary Rose because she's excellent, I'm going to recoup that all in book sales, that's probably not ever going to happen. If you say, hey, I'm going to write this amazing book and it's going to create credibility for me, it's going to help me reach clients, and they're going to become clients of mine all day long. But yeah, Amazon's a giant racket. They just crush authors, crush them. It's
R-
terrible.
Yes. As a matter of fact, it was, I think, last year that I discovered lulu.com. And
Okay.
Lulu Press, it's a self-publishing platform. It is a little bit more expensive to order your author copies,
Oh,
but
sure.
you get more of the royalties of
Oh,
whatever however many books that you sell, you get more of that. And there is, within the content marketing world, there's
yeah.
actually a shift or an emphasis toward selling your book straight from your website instead of
Hmm.
Amazon. The reason is, if you use lulu.com
Yeah.
to self-publish your book and you hook it into Shopify, you will get
Oh,
the data.
yes.
You
Yeah.
don't
You
get the
don't get
data.
anything from Amazon. No.
Right. You do not get the data from Amazon. So
Hmm.
when you get the data, that means you can follow up with anyone who has published your book, or I'm sorry, who has bought your book.
Yeah.
And so this is a great way to build like a direct mail list.
Yep.
It's a great way to build your email list. It's a great way to maybe send some bonus items maybe to somebody who bought your book, and just say, hey, thanks. And just wanted to, send this to as a thank you for a great review or whatever. I mean,
Hmm.
there's a lot of different ways that you can use that data, but at least you have it instead, because Amazon, they're not going to give you that
No.
data.
No, because that's their customer, not yours. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So yeah, that's something to look into for anyone listening. Just check out lulu.com,
Yeah. I'll
Lulu
check that out. Thank
Press,
you.
and
Yeah.
yeah, and you can see some options maybe there. So what else would you like to share about your publishing journey? Anything else?
Well, I mentioned about the Audible. part of the reason I was so convicted to do my own audiobook is I really appreciate it as a consumer when the author reads their own book. And it's a lot of work to read your own book. You've got to go to a studio. I had to have a different producer for that. But it was something that this goes back, Mary Rose, to our earlier comments about you've got to be just so passionate about what you're doing. And I was just really passionate that people could hear my voice, hear how I say these things to clients. And so I invested the time, and it was dozens of hours. And it's not a lot of fun to sit in the studio and read the book and to have the sound guy say, no, go back and read that chapter again because you cleared your throat in the middle of it. Whatever. It's not like a podcast like you and I riffing here.
Right.
It's a lot of work, but it really, the more conviction you can have in the process, the better it's going to be.
Oh, sure. And
No.
when you hear the author reading their book, you feel like you're having a conversation, with this person. Like you're hearing them and you're like, yeah, I don't know if you've had people who've written to you regarding like that they had just heard your book through the audiobook or they read it. And I'm not sure which one like causes people to respond to you. Do you have any
Well,
thoughts or any responses from
yeah,
that?
it's funny. So I mentioned I'm at a conference right now as we're recording this, and I was talking to a group of people, just to 4 or 5 people in the hallway, and someone comes over and he taps me on the shoulder. He says, "You must be Matthew Jarvis." And I said, "I am." How did you know? He says, "I heard your voice down the hall, and I knew that voice from your audiobook." And I just like he just heard my voice coming down the hallway and found me and had to introduce himself, and which was again an incredible honor. But Mary Rose, to
Right.
your point, this guy, he feels like we've known each other forever. I've never met him. He seems like a wonderful person, but he's heard my
Right.
like. Think of the people whose voice you hear most often: your spouse,
Mhm.
your children. This is a voice, so they've heard. I don't know how long audiobook is, 6 or 8 hours of my voice. There's a connection that's there.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah. And I admit I've written a book myself, but I did not do an audiobook.
it's
But now
work.
that you're talking about it, I'm like, well, I think I'm going to be coming out with a second version of it, but I'm
Oh,
actually
fun.
working on a second book. So, so, but with the second book for sure, I'm going to be doing, I believe, an audiobook. But you're right. It's like, it just, it's, and one of the most important words, by the way, when I started copywriting years ago, is the word you. Using the
Mm.
word you
Mm-hmm.
instead of, "Hey, you guys." Now, I see a lot of people who, use that with their YouTube videos or whatever, and they'll say, "You guys," and I'm like, it's
Mm-mm.
one person who is listening to you. And when
Yes.
you use that word you, and in a book, the same thing, you use the word you, that immediately connects the reader to you,
Mm-hmm.
the author.
It
So
does. Yes.
yeah, so that's just a little important little tip also to think about. So let's move on to your marketing.
Yeah. Yeah.
How are you marketing your book? Have you had media exposure? And if you have, how did you get it?
Yeah, so my marketing certainly hasn't been as robust as it could have been, but the best media exposure, including Mary Rose, things like this, was reaching out to podcasters that I already knew. And so Michael Kitces, I had been on his show before. I was able to reach out to him and say, "Hey, as a result of having been on your show, everyone reached out to me, and I wrote this book, and I would love to share this with your audience to help them grow their practices," right? But I was able to approach him from how can I help him? Because
Right.
what most approaches are is, "Hey, Mary Rose, you have an audience, and I would love to talk to your audience because it's important to me." Well, Mary Rose, there's nothing in that for you, right? And so again, to the premise of the book, deliver massive value. I always
Right.
want to see how can I deliver value. I do mail a lot of authors' copies of my books to people that I meet at conferences, people that I've heard of. I'll write them a quick note. "Hey, really appreciated you sharing your story on Mary Rose's podcast. Encloses a copy of my story. Love to buy a cup of coffee sometime if we're ever in the same town." Matthew Jarvis.
Right.
Uh,
Right.
so
I
that
love
that's done
it.
a lot for me, yeah. And then I have my
Yeah.
podcast audience already, and so that really helped. And so I would really encourage the podcast audience, hey, go out and buy my book. Please take a minute to give it a 5-star review on Amazon. It also helped every time I meet somebody, even including at this conference. My book's been out for a few years now. When someone says, "Hey, I really loved your book," I say, "Hey, it would really be a big favor to me if you love the book. Pull out your phone, give it a quick 5-star review, because that does really give it a lot of credibility when you go on and it's got hundreds of 5-star reviews."
Right. Right. What you said about being on Michael Kitz's podcast is a great approach also to use with journalists by
Yes.
sending a press release. So when you do release a book, sending out a press release and then positioning it so that it's basically coming across to the journalist of, hey, I have something that I believe is going to help your audience. I have something that is newsworthy. I have something that is talks about a topic that is a
Hmm.
hot topic right now,
Hmm.
that kind of a deal. But you're right. You're looking at delivering value for that person instead of just, hey, I want you to write about me.
Yep. If you really want to take this next level, whether it's your book or anything else, right? So let's use journalists as an example. So if I see if there's, so I have a list of journalists who cover the industry that I'm interested in, right? And so I have alerts on Google whenever they publish an article. It lets me know, and I go and look. And if it's any kind of article that I can add substance to, what I'll do is I'll share that article to my social network, to LinkedIn. And again, it doesn't matter if you have 5 followers or 5 million followers. I'll share it. And I'll say, hey, Mary Rose wrote this great article about how to self-publish your book, and reminded me of a couple of points from my book that everyone should keep in mind: point 1, point 2, point 3. And then I'll share that to my network. I'll screenshot it. And then, Mary Rose, I'll send it to you, and I'll say, Mary Rose, I loved your article on the 3 things that people that makes mistakes they made. If you ever write about this topic again, here's 2 more points to consider from my book. So now I've complimented you. I've helped grow your audience, not by a lot, but I've helped grow your audience. And then I've brought value. I said, hey, if you ever write about this again, well, of course you're going to write about it again. You're a journalist. You have to write every single day. Here's how I can help you with that. So of course you're flattered. You're going to reach out. You say, hey, no one's messaged me that. Everyone else just says, hey, will you interview me? Yeah, for sure. I want to interview you now. So it's
Right.
guerrilla warfare. It takes work, but it works really well.
That is that is like one of the best pieces of advice I think I've heard in a while regarding marketing your
Yes.
book. I've been part of some launch teams. So,
Mm-hmm.
when you write a book, it's good to gather together people who, are friends and even acquaintances, but people who have your back and people who support you, your fans,
Mm-hmm.
and say, hey, would you be part of my launch team? And then what you do is you send them different things like memes, images, blurbs that they can use in social media so that you can start to get the buzz going before it's launched, and then after it's launched to promote it. But being part of a launch team, I've been a part of a few of them now, and
Yeah,
I just love that idea of being able to put that out there. But what you said also is it's another way of delivering value,
it
you know?
is. It is.
And yes, that will definitely make you remember. I mean, it will cause you to be remembered by that
Yep.
journalist. I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
that.
I do the
Oh,
same. I
that's
talk
so
about this in
good.
my book. I do the same thing with what I call centers of influence for my practice: accountants, attorneys, business bankers, and that approach. And again, I talk about in my book is those types of professionals often charge by the hour, right? An attorney as an example, and they're always fighting people trying to get paid. And so what I'll do is I'll call them and I'll say, hey, often my clients are asking me for an introduction to an attorney, which is true. I don't know that I can actually send you any referrals, which is also true. So out of respect for your time, I'd like to pay for an hour of it so that I can ask you several questions about how you practice, so that if I do have an opportunity to refer someone to you, I'm sending you the right person. So this is an approach that they've never heard, right? I'm not calling them, asking them for referrals. I'm not calling to ask for an hour of their time for free. I'm saying I respect you as a professional. I'm willing to pay for your time, and I want to make sure that you're the right fit. So I send you the right people, back to not having to graduate clients. Now I'm in this category. No one, Mary Rose, has ever called an accountant, an attorney, and offered to pay for their time. I'm like the first one. And certainly no financial advisor has ever done that. Now, for listeners, you might think, well, now Jarvis has called all the COIs and the strategy doesn't work. A, I have not. There are an endless number. And B, even if I had, that's okay. Like, you can still do it, because, and it's a win-win. Because the worst thing, Mary Rose, that happens is I meet with this guy or gal and I find out that they're not a good fit for my clients. Okay, well, now I know. Or they are a good fit. And when a client comes in and says, hey, I need an accountant or an attorney, I can say, hey, I've actually met with Mary Rose. She's phenomenal. Give her a call. Tell her that I said to call, and she'll take good care of you. So I just can't lose there.
Oh my gosh, no.
Yeah,
And by the way, that is a very hot need, a hot topic,
it
I guess.
is.
I
Yeah.
belong to the Financial Planners Association, and on
Oh,
their
yeah.
message board, yeah, on their
All the
message
time.
board,
Yep.
they are always looking for referrals for attorneys different specific kinds of attorneys, for estate or elder care or whatever.
Hmm. Hmm.
So that is another great approach. My goodness, I love all these tips. This is great.
Yeah.
So where can people find your book?
Yeah, right now my book's on Amazon. As much as I bemoan what they charge me, I don't right now. I used to, Mary Rose, when my book first came out, I would buy it in bulk from the printer, and my kids would do all the delivery. They would do all the fulfillment of it, and it was great fun. But they got busy with school and whatnot, and so I turned it over to Amazon so I could focus on other things. But yeah, it's on Amazon.com. You can check out our podcast, the Perfect RIA Podcast. You can find me at a lot of conferences. I love to go out and see people.
Okay, very good. And I know that you are a speaker.
I
So if
am,
someone
yeah.
did want to contact you for a possible speaking engagement, how would they do that?
Yeah, if you go to my website, MatthewJarvis.com, so Matthew with two T's, MatthewJarvis.com, there's a form for because I speak quite a bit in the industry, so which is a lot of fun.
Right, right. I did have one last question. This
Oh,
might be a
please.
little bit of a doozy. It's not
Ooh.
on my list, but it's kind of like this hot. I keep saying hot topic. It's it's something that has been on my mind a lot lately, and that is AI.
Oh,
So,
sure.
do you use AI? And if you do, how do you use it?
Okay, well, let me put my little zinger in here. So, I've been using AI for the last 30 years in the form of spell check. So, AI itself is not new. Spell check is, in fact, the same algorithm as AI. I use it for idea generation. Like, if I don't want to go research something, and Mary Rose, between you and I, let's pretend this isn't recorded. I use it a lot when I'm helping my kids with homework. So, because I have no idea what they're learning about, and so they'll say, "Hey, write a piece about this," and so I'll Google chat gpt, write me 400 words about this. Now of course you can't copy and paste it, but now I have a framework and I have some ideas and I can get going. But otherwise, no, I don't, Mary Rose. I feel like it's a super overused term, like somehow it's going to solve all the world's ills, and
Right,
it's a tool, like just like spell check, just like Google, just like anything else.
right, right. I was just curious because it has basically made a really big impact in the content writing world,
Yeah.
copywriters, content writers. And the thing about it is, I think it's okay to use to as a jumping off as a
Hmm.
jump start to your creativity, but not to let it
No.
overrun your creativity, not to let it control it.
No.
So I use it to brainstorm ideas.
Yep.
And I love it for that because there's a lot of times my mind is going in 100 directions and I'm like, okay, where do I land? And so I, will put in some initial ideas and, generate some more and it does. So, I brainstorming is good. Organizing some thoughts sometimes
Hmm.
it's good. I actually did use it, by the way, to create a PowerPoint presentation.
Oh, very
And
cool.
and the way I did that is I uploaded the content and then I asked it to write me the macro whatever prompt, I guess, for PowerPoint, and it gave me
Oh,
the
sure.
code.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow.
so once I did that, that is just because I create my own presentations also, but once I did that, what it did, and I just hit run, it plugged in the content that I gave it into all the slides individually. So I
Wow.
did not have to create the slides individually. All I had to do was just add some images. And then I went through, of course, to, change up a little bit, maybe the content if I needed to. But that was a big time saver.
Yeah,
But
it's an
yeah,
incredible
but there's
tool.
a lot of people that are using it for writing, and I wasn't quite sure if it was something you experimented with. There's no shame here. I'm not trying to
No, no, no.
to judge anybody, but
No, not at
but I
all.
always like to know how people are using it since it's such a
Yeah,
popular topic.
something I keep in mind, whether it's Chat GPT or AI or marketing in general, which is if generic content would land every client, then the big shops would have all the clients, right? The Fidelities, the
Right,
Merrills, the Vanguard, like they're cranking out more generic content a day than Mary Rose, you and I will do together in our lifetimes, right? But
right,
we can write really specific, really personalized content that will speak to a group of people that AI generator or a large firm just can't speak to, and that's really our goal, right? Our goal is to say
right.
we have a very unique message for a very unique group, and for that group, it's the perfect message.
Well, there you go. Well, that was the end of my question, so I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much, Matthew. This has been such a pleasure. You have given me a lot to think about,
Well, thank
and I'm
you.
sure you've given our listeners a lot to think about too. So, thank you for your time, and I will definitely let you know what. Thank you so much, Matthew, for spending the time with me. And you have given me so many great ideas. And I know you've given our audience some great ideas too. So I will definitely let you know when this is live and wish you all the best at the conference that you're at.
Mary Rose, thank you so much for having me. It was a real honor.
So thank you.